sharpen your saw. Yeah, it's no use trying to keep and cut wood. Your saw gets blunt and you're using twice as much energy. Stop, take a break, sharpen your saw, and then you'll cut wood faster.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
What is up, everybody? I am Jason Trost, the host of the Business of Betting podcast. We're going to try something different today. In the spirit of, I would like to think, the old school Diarrhea CEO, the very popular podcast, Stephen Bartlett, a British guy. I think the podcast originally started to kind of get into the psyche of a CEO. And I think it's a great thing. You know, CEOs control companies. They have a lot of influence in how companies are run, how happy employees are, what the company accomplishes. And I want to dive a little bit into what it's like to be a CEO. So before I get into that, I kind of want to lay the scene. So I remember when I first heard about a CEO coach, I would say it's probably 10, 15 years ago. It's very early in Smarkets. And my first initial reaction was thinking, this is ridiculous that some people have CEO coaches. You know, I played lots of sports as a kid, and obviously you have coaches for that. But I thought for a knowledge worker or somebody that is creating a company who would have a coach, what a ridiculous idea. And here I am 10 years later with a coach. The way I found my coach is I'm a part of a group called YPO, and one of the members of my forum suggested Liam, who is sitting with me here today, to moderate our retreat. It's something you do once a year with your forum, and you go deep into various topics. And my forum mate, Roland, just kept talking about this guy, how wonderful he was. And we went to the retreat, and Liam went through his presentation about how do you look at your whole body? How do you think as an executive? And pretty much everything he said to me really resonated with me. And I was going through a really rough patch at the time. My company was going through a rough patch. My marriage was going through a bit of a rough patch. And Liam everything he was saying was resonating with me, like just hitting the nail on the head. And so after the retreat, I reached out and said, hey, can you help me? And so that was about 4 years ago, I would say.
Yep.
And so for the last 4 years, Liam Forde of The Zone has been my Yoda, my mentor, my coach, lots of different titles you might want to call him, my advisor, my
nemesis.
And so what I thought would be interesting today, in the vein of Diary of a CEO in its original purpose, like pull the layers back on what it's like to be a CEO. And I thought that might be interesting for the audience. So we're going to talk less about betting and more what it's like behind the curtains of a CEO and see what we come up with. So I wrote down 5 things.
5 things.
I wrote down 5 things. I've written down many things. For the purposes of this podcast, things that I've learned through the course of our journey.
Okay.
And where I thought would be an interesting place to start was I had this idea of a CEO had to be kind of a hard ass. So there's a very, very famous basketball coach in the United States. His name is Bobby Knight. And if you're older than 35, you probably know who he is. And if you're younger than 35, you might say, who the fuck is Bobby Knight? But Bobby Knight was very famous for winning, and he was very famous for being hard ass. I mean, he was famous for throwing chairs, screaming at his players. And my dad used to point him out like, that's a coach. And maybe it's because my dad said it, but I think it was quite in the popular culture coming out of the 80s. You know, you had the Wall Street movies, like Greed is Good, that kind of like that hyper masculine, like slamming chairs energy. And I thought that was the model for what a good CEO could be. And so one of the first things we worked on was, you know, that's not really a helpful model. And it took me a long time to learn. And sometimes my base instincts want to take me back to that angry coach. So why don't we start there? So what did you think about when I told you about angry coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, that's a model, right? It's a model. And I think in life, you have to put your bet on a strategy, right? And that he was betting on one strategy. And at the time, that was probably a very effective strategy. But I think also, I guess as players, we're getting paid a lot more than the standard worker,
They're working for free, actually. I mean, they were working for scholarship.
Yeah, oh, they were working for scholarship.
Yes.
But there was a big bet they were placing, right?
Kind of.
You know what I mean? Like if we can
Most of them didn't go on to the NBA.
Right. And it's in a very defined particular, model. It's not sort of, I guess it's a physical coach, it's a mental coach, and you need that sort of mental toughness on the court. I don't know. I don't play basketball. I've played rugby and done martial arts and that. So I understand that. But ultimately, if you're trying to build a culture long term, it's a strategy that doesn't work in the long term. And I think what really shifted it for you was I said, okay, imagine you're going to actually bring your kids up like that. How do you think they'd be as teenagers?
Really good basketball players.
Yeah, right. So, and if they're not going to be a basketball player, if they were terrorized as kids, as parenting, what are they going to turn out like? And I think you sort of sat back and reflected and went, well, maybe they'd have problems later. And I think that's the philosophy in which you need to make a life strategy. So that there's times for being tough, and there's times to being caring, and you need to work with that, right? Sometimes you do need that toughness, like, hey, you need to get out of bed and go for a run. And sometimes you're going to need to be that emotional support. But if you're just a one-trick pony all the time, and it's just always about bashing you over the head and always about not good enough. And hey, you're just not good enough, son. Like, you're not a trust. Like, we get up and we fight. You're going to cause some problems later because we're not all the same. We don't all have the same motivations. We don't all have the same patterns in our brain, the way we process things. And some people are more afraid than others. I always remember when I had my first two kids and, I was sort of a little bit more in that model, a bit more the strict parent. And I remember walking my youngest daughter along a wall once, and I said, I'll hold your hand the first time, but after that, you're on your own, right? And she got up on the wall and she said, Dad, I need you to hold my hand. And I had this feeling like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then I thought, hang on, why not? And I tried it. So I held the hand for second, third, fourth, fifth time. Sixth time, she got up there and said, no, I don't want you to hold my hand, Dad. And she was running down the wall. So her performance was actually better than my first daughter, and there was no real difference physically. So it was a big lesson for me. So
one of the things you said about it at the time that really resonated with me is that Bobby Knight's school of thought might work well if you need performance for the next 30 seconds. But if you think of a knowledge worker, you got to be there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, over and over and over again. You're really running a marathon rather than sprinting. Whereas sports is more about high performance for the next 20 seconds. So like it's also a different model that resonated with me.
Yeah. You need a different strategy for a different context. That's the thing.
So do you think there's a role for that angry coach who barks at employees, or do you think that is too old-fashioned and ineffective and doesn't have a place? There's no place. Because I think famously, I don't know all the details, but Steve Jobs and if you take these famous CEOs, a lot of them were famous for yelling at their staff and being very unpleasant to work for. Like, is it possible to be pleasant and to be high productive?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's about being clear and setting the right expectations and having the tough conversations, but you don't have to be angry with it. So I can still have a tough conversation, but I can make it light, or I can make it deep, or I can have a line in the sand and say, hey, look, Jason, if this doesn't change, we've got to have another different conversation, right? I don't need to be angry for you to get the message, right? You get the message, you're like, oh, shit, right? And then, because if my anger is pushing against you, then it's my anger that's driving you. Whereas if I have a conversation with you and say, hey, we're going to have a different conversation, you then have to wake up your own power and responsibility, and your own willpower has to wake up. That's what I want in my culture. I want people that can self-motivate, self-wake up and have those conversations with themselves. Otherwise, there's nothing scalable. So, if you don't scale personal responsibility, then you're never going to scale your business. And responsibility to me is the ability to respond. That's what it means. So I want to train my people to be able to respond in every different sort of situation. So that's my belief anyway. And, and I've been doing this for a long time around the world, 40 countries, 100,000 odd people, and it works. But it's a long game. It's not a quarter by quarter play. This is building a business for the long game.
I think I've been a CEO for about 15 years now, and I can think of times when I've really blown up at employees. And on the positive side, I don't think I ever got personal, saying you're a piece of shit, all that kind of stuff. I've been good about that, but I have been very animated, using lots of swear words about this is fucking unacceptable, etc. And I think through coaching that I've done with you, the mentorship I've done with you, I've really realized that there's a more productive way to kind of get your message across.
Yes.
But I still have that base instinct of that Bobby Knight in you, that Bobby Knight in me, rather, that just wants to have a go, drop some F-bombs, or something against the...
Yeah. And that's the war. Like, I think the CEOs that get respected in the longer term, and you pointed out, these high-profile CEOs, but that's not what necessarily makes the world go round for the other few hundred million people in the workforce, right? There's lots of other companies that are contributing to growth and stuff, and CEOs run them very differently. So I think, it is the long game. So play the long game. It's like watching the stock market every second and, like, oh my God, my stock's up. Oh my God, it's down. What am I going to do? And you just become a reactive bunny. You're just like always triggered.
That used to be my first job. Did you know that?
Right.
That was my first job. I was triggered all day long. Just sit there watching a number.
And that just drains your energy, drains your attention. And then in the evening, you just have to like go, okay, how do I get back my energy? And it's usually alcohol, drugs, woman, wine, and song, or whatever it is. And that's not a long-term strategy if you want to build a family. So
great. Moving on to topic number 2 that I learned working with you. You talk about flow is a big part of your teachings. So the flow state. And one of the big ideas of flow is that you become super productive when you're in a flow state. But that was less interesting because I think everybody kind of intuitively gets to that. But there's 2 stages, struggle and rest. I think I'm getting those correct.
Yeah.
Struggle and rest, which are necessary conditions in order to get to a flow state. Basically giving your brain space to think, fixing your free attention. And going back to this Wolf of Wall Street or, greed is good, Gordon Gekko, Bobby Knight world of which I grew up in, I had this idea that, the American executive needs to work. You sleep when you're dead. You got to push. And this idea of giving your brain a break, going for a walk in nature or journaling or doing something with your hands. These are very, very novel ideas for me. And it's like the Bobby Knight thing, it's something that still doesn't come naturally to me because my brain is still coded to keep working and grinding and grind and work. And then when you're done working, you grind a little bit more. But the theory around in order to get the most out of your brain, to have the most energy, comes from letting your brain get into the right condition in order to pop up to that state has resonated with.
That's right. So with the flow state, you need the challenge, right? It's very difficult to get into flow without some sort of challenge. So it needs to have a level of difficulty. And then you need to take a rest. You need to take your mind off it. So maybe you struggle for 2 hours and can't solve a problem and it's like going around in your mind, and then you take a shower or go to the gym. What you'll find is, as same with everybody, is once you relax for a period of time, it could be 10 minutes, it could be half an hour, all of a sudden the solutions start to come. And then you go, right. And that's when you drop into flow. Because when you're in the struggle state all the time, you're using all very, very different neurochemicals. So you're pumping your body full of adrenaline. So you're really like, wow, I've got to solve this. You're anxious. You're like, I've got to get it done by tomorrow. And that wears the brain out. And also it makes the brain super focused. And for ideation, you need your brain in pattern recognition. So in pattern recognition, your brain's sort of lighting up all over the place and you're using different parts of your brain to solve the problem. So you might look at it from a different angle. That's what creates the solution, and that's the flow state. And then in the flow state, you got your dopamine, your serotonin, everything's like pumping up and like you're feeling great now. And then you need to replenish that because we're humans, we're not machines. And so these neurochemicals will run out. And then so you need to take a bit of a longer break, and that's what like weekends are designed for, or going for a long run or a long walk, however it is, or playing with the family, playing with the kids, or playing ball, whatever it does to get you out of that, but in a longer way. And it's sort of a big recovery phase, if you like. So it's really important. And the difference between flow and the zone is that the zone is values-led. So it's values-driven. In other words, it's you get into flow or you get into the zone when you're in flow and you're working in alignment with your values, right? Because you can be in flow state, anything. You could be making anything, something destructive or something constructive. So it needs your values as a filter to put you to the constructive side. And that's the difference.
One of the things that really resonated with me when I put it into practice was using your hands. So whether it's Legos or playing with my kids or doing sports or, because I imagine a lot of people, we live in our brains all the time. And one of the ways to give your brain a break is to do something with your hands, that especially the more technical it is.
Yeah, well, you use your body. You see, your body and mind are inherently linked. They're not different systems. They're a complete system. So what I find is in the morning, I need to use my brain to kick my ass and get out of bed. Like, Liam, get up, go to yoga. Liam, go to the gym, right? So I'm using my brain to get my body, because my body's resting and it's all comfy and it's, I'm snuggled up. I don't want to get up, right? But I use my brain to kick that into action. And in the evening, my brain's like really like fired up. I'm like, wow, all these ideas, all these things to do. Wow, wouldn't that be great? Or whatever it is. So I have to quieten my mind down. And that's when I use my body to quieten my mind down. So I'll go for a run, or I'll go to the gym, or I'll do yoga or something with my body or my hands. And that then gets you out of your mind and into your body. So you're switching the systems on and off. And that's the way you can use it in balance.
And the side effect of not doing this is you just feel tired and sluggish all day long.
You feel tired and you're pushing through. Then you have to push through the sluggishness.
Yeah.
So you're not,
It's called being American.
Exactly. It's like you got to recharge your battery fundamentally. Or as I think Stephen Covey said, sharpen your saw. It's no use trying to keep cut wood. Your saw gets blunt and you're using twice as much energy. Stop, take a break, sharpen your saw, and then you'll cut wood faster. So I like that analogy.
The next topic is around health. So I think we all know that health plays a big role in people's awareness and, your ability to show up. I was somebody that played tons and tons of sports as a kid. I was naturally kind of athletic, not super athletic, but I could play tons of sports fairly easily. And I thought I would kind of be in shape my whole life. And then I basically had Papa John's pizza probably 5 nights a week and drank a lot of Bud Light 7 nights a week in university. And who knew that I would gain 25 pounds, but I gained 25 pounds. And I remember looking at a picture, I think I was 26 or something, and I was at my brother's wedding and I had a gut in one of my pictures and I was like, holy fucking shit, I have a gut. So I started running and did a little bit of things, but along the way I always ran every once in a while, but I never made health a priority, partially because I think I did so many sports as a kid. I kind of took it, I kind of thought I was like in shape already and I didn't need to do anything. And I don't know if it was, I think there's a huge movement in health off the back of COVID because we were all sitting home drinking too much and not doing enough. So part of that I think is a reaction to COVID, which is great. But I think from my own perspective, talking to you, I came across a book called Outlive by Peter Attia. You're the one that turned me on to that. And it's really, I've done a 180 on my view to health, going from going for the odd run here and there to thinking that health is the basis for everything. So, kind of in a Maslow hierarchy of needs, you kind of have to have your physical fitness at the base level. And so I would say that really the last year or two, I've really got my house in order in terms of health. And that's been extremely helpful. What's your perspective on health?
Well, exactly that. It's a long game. And there is no doubt that we peak between, in our 20s and 30s, between 20 and 30s, we're our peak physically, mentally, we're like sharp, we can do anything. And that's the thing, we have this version of ourselves that we can do anything and we forget there's a slow decline. So we're losing about 10% of our muscle mass every year unless we do something about it. And that's just going to happen, but we don't notice it. Every decade.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like that old analogy, the slow boiling frog. We don't notice it. We put on a kilo or a pound or 2 pounds or 5 pounds. It's no big deal. Then the Christmas time comes and we put another few pounds and we put another few pounds. And then before you know it, you're 20 pounds overweight. And, you look in the mirror and then you go, oh, and then you're sort of stuck because you haven't built health into your routine. And now you have to interrupt your routine and build a new habit. And that is big because you're switching from one cognitive load to an next. Now you have to say, wow, I have to get up half an hour earlier or an hour earlier to get this done and fit it into my day, and you've got kids or whatever it is, it's a big struggle. So it's better to understand that now and say, right, let me start making it a habit now. Like, you just went to the gym a while ago and you feel a lot better, right? So you're making yourself stronger, you're giving yourself a dopamine hit, so you come back, you're smarter, your pattern recognition's better, Mainly you're a little bit tired after the gym, but you have some good food and hit that protein load and you're back. And that's very important to create it as a long-term habit. So everything I'm talking about is a long play rather than a short play. And that's the philosophy you have to live your life with.
So from your perspective, I think we've been working together for about 4 years.
Yeah.
And when we started seeing it, I would do the odd run here and there, but I didn't take health very seriously. I'd eat McDonald's once a week. So I'd eat crappy food often.
Yeah.
And I think the gateway drug that got me going down the path was you had a Fitbit and you charge Fitbit.
Yeah.
And I got that. And that started opening my brain to what happens when you drink and sleep and all these kinds of things. But from your coachy perspective, you would see you have this CEO client who has potential, is not taking care of their body. How do you manipulate young CEO to
Just call him a fat fuck. Like do the Bobby Knight.
Took you a while. I mean, I would respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody is different. Everybody's motivations are different. And so, as a coach, you need to feel, do you need to be the companion on that journey? Do you need to have a heart-to-heart with someone in order to wake them up? Or do you need to have a head-to-head with someone to wake them up? And it's very different. So sometimes you'll need to have that confrontational, conversation to wake someone up, because it is very much a resistance that they have. And you have to break through the resistance. And breaking through the resistance can take 2 years or 2 minutes. And sometimes, just like in work, you need to have that 2-minute conversation to break through the resistance and open up the possibilities. And if I remember rightly, I was pretty tough on you about your health.
Yeah, I remember I kept eating McDonald's and I knew it was bad for me.
Yeah.
I kept doing it.
Yeah, and so I'd make jokes a little bit. I'd do little things about, how's McDonald's bod? Do you know what I mean?
Amazing.
Yeah, and you'd say amazing, but in your back of your eyes, I could see, he's right. He's right. It took us a while to reset that physical stuff, but I know the foundation is your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, and that's what's going to make you a better CEO, right? Not the short gains. I could sort of coach you and say, hey, do this one thing, do that one thing, or how could you make that better? How could you do this? And they'll make differences commercially, but it's going to be short-term gains. It's not a strategic play. It's just a tactic. So I'm always working on what's the strategy for your long-term success as a human, as a dad, as a husband or a partner, and as a leader, and also as a contributor to society. Because I think, every organization has to know what their contribution to society is, why we're here, what are we making a difference? Because that's still long-term play. And if you're not making any difference to society except for a negative one, then you're going to have those backlashes, right? So it's very important to always think about the philosophy in which I'm going to play the long game. And there's often that thing that you do where you sort of write down, what do you want people to say at your funeral?
I've never done that.
Yeah, it's a pretty good exercise.
Have you done that?
I do it probably every 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And just say, what do people...
Does it change a lot?
It changes a lot, yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, well, when I was young, I was like, hey, he made lots of money. He had lots of good-looking girls.
Funny.
Yeah, he's funny, la, la, la. And then you have a family. And then you change. Oh, people say I'm a good dad. I look after my kids. I take care of the family, blah, blah, blah. And then, as your kids get older, they don't want the dad. They want the parent. You know what I mean? They want you to be, they know you're the biological father, but they want the wisdom. They don't want the control anymore, right? So they want the wisdom. And that's it. If you step into the wisdom space, that's long-term, Holding their hand crossing the road when they're young is smart. But once they're old enough, you need to let go and trust them. And then when they become teenagers and they rebel or whatever they do against you, and, their mates become their gods instead of the dad or the mum. And then you need to be patient, because they will come back round and it'll kick all your judgments, and, you got to be there for them and love them no matter what. And then the wisdom will come out and they'll see the long game, but everybody's different.
That pivots nicely to the next thing I wanted to chew on a little bit, in that the fact that I have 3 kids, 7, 5, and 1. And I think this often gets talked about in the context of women and balancing professional and home life. But in the context of myself, I 100% believe that I am not as productive as a CEO as when I was single. I had much more time to work, much more energy. And this isn't necessarily something that we have worked on together, but I think through the work that we've done, I've gotten an awareness of balancing things. And in the words of Scott Galloway, and I love the way he sums it up, you can have everything you want, just not all at the same time. And I definitely think I'm less aggressive as a CEO. I have less time to think about my business. I have less energy because kids take a lot of energy. And I'm okay with that balance because I think, to your point, nobody says they were like amazing at this board meeting at their funeral. They want to say, Dad, I love you and I miss you. That's what you want somebody to say. So I'm okay with that choice, but I think it's something you don't hear a lot of, especially male CEOs talking about the effect that families have on being a CEO. Now, maybe you can make the argument that because I have kids, I have to be more focused. I have to be more disciplined about my health. I have to be more, I guess, on top of it to make sure everything keeps going forward. But I think on balance, I would have more energy, like I said, if I were single. Just curious to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that's true? Do you think you can be a high-performance CEO and have kids, be a great dad, and be a great CEO? Or does one necessarily have to affect the other?
Not well, you can totally do it. But you got to realize why you had kids. So did you have
beyond
kids?
The tax benefits?
Yeah, beyond the tax benefits and beyond to, stop your partner complaining or whatever it is. Like, I know that fundamentally Smarkets is about trying to create a better world, and even the play for Mr. and Mrs. Average, right, in the betting world. And that's a really good mission. It's the same thing with kids. So when you have kids, you stop talking about I and you focus your attention on them. And you go, right, I'm building the next generation. What generation do I want to build? That's the thing. So you're actually running two companies, if you want to talk about it. The company of kids, and each kid's different, so it's another little venture, and your own business. And then you've got to keep the marriage going. You've got to keep the marriage exciting. You've got to keep, that sort of thing going. And so when you talk about like, oh, I don't have as much time, I'm not as productive. Well, maybe in the short term, maybe during the early phases of kids, you're going to be less productive. But if you create them as productive humans for the future, you're actually contributing to a more productive world. So in the ecosystem of which you're operating, you're creating more productivity. It's just a different way. So if you change your mindset into, it's really important that I'm creating these productive citizens, good citizens of the world, they're critical thinkers, they're kind, they know how to collaborate and cooperate. They understand triggers for creativity. They want to be productive members of society. Maybe they want to be entrepreneurs. Maybe they want to be carers. Whatever it is, that if you're creating that, then in my world, you're doing a really good job. End of story. A really good job. That is the job. Because fundamentally, as a species, we're procreating in order to create survival of the species, but also to improve society. We always want to improve things. We want things better for our kids than we had it, right? Sometimes that goes too far and we give them too much and they lose the ability to struggle. They lose the ability to get into flow because struggle to them is like, oh, I don't want to struggle. They resist the struggle they need to climb the mountain, and then you've sort of disempowered them. So it's always that balance between giving and getting. But I think as a parent, you move into the giving phase of your life and you go, okay, this is what I'm giving to in a bigger picture. And then again, you're going to have employees with families. So they don't want to feel guilty coming to work because guilty people are less productive and they don't stay at your companies longer. Now, it's not about making it so comfortable that there is no struggle in life. So, there has to be some struggle because that's what keeps you sharp. That's what keeps you fit. Having to run for the train or cycle to work or do something as a bit of a struggle is going to make you stronger. It's going to give you a higher level of resilience, and that you're going to be better performance overall. So it's a sort of a long way of saying, yes, you might be less productive in one area of your life, one slice of a very small part of your life in this world, but in the bigger picture, you're actually more productive.
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
You've worked with, before we go, I don't know, hundreds of CEOs over the years.
Yeah.
From a pattern recognition perspective, how similar and how different are CEOs?
Everyone has a different, if I go back to one of the models that I created many years ago when I left my CEO role of my other business and then went, how can I teach other CEOs to be better? Is this whole person model. And, it's about some CEOs are very creative and they live in this imaginary world and it's all about dreams and things like that. And that's where their superpower is, right? And they're going to struggle to ground it. Some CEOs are very grounded, very practical. It's all operations and getting stuff done and it's all about tasks. And sometimes they forget to dream, and other CEOs are all about moving things around and it's very, very physical and stuff like that. They love that sort of world. And they'll forget to celebrate and play. And then other CEOs are anchored in their head. It's very thinky, like it's all judgments, and that's what they get their rewards because they make the right judgment, the right call. So they're looking at something and they're discerning which is the best route to go. It's very strategic. And their judgments is what's going to get in the way of their success because they're going to judge everything because that's just the way they're built. So, you walk in and you see someone and you're going to make a judgment on that person. Now, when you're making a judgment on a thing, that's fine because you're using it as a strategy to improve your business, like that process, whatever it is. But when you make a judgment on a person, what you're doing is you're creating a separation between you two. It's a wall, and that wall takes energy. And so every judgment you have on someone else...
Talking about any CEO in particular?
I don't know.
This is from the hundreds of CEOs. Yes.
And this wall takes energy, takes attention, and destroys creativity. So every judgment you have takes your energy, particularly if you're judging things that you can't control, and then you're just spinning your wheel. And that will mean that you're drained even before you get started on your day. So by the time you've got here on the train, on the bike, or whatever it is, and you've judged 200 people on the way, and someone's, voting this way, someone's voting that way, someone's doing this, someone's doing that. Oh my God, they're eating a McDonald's. The idiot, right? Even though you used to be a McDonald's eater, like, oh, look at that guy. He clearly doesn't work out. Or you get to work, you're exhausted. You've got this massive wall of judgments, and it's just unhelpful. There's no need to have those judgments, and that's what a lot of CEOs, face into is that by the time they get to work, their attention's already full up with stuff that is useless. It's going to not make a difference to their day. Well, it has made a difference to their day because it's de-energized them. So it's about how do you clear your head of all that judgments and then stop being so judgmental and then put your attention on growing your business, being strategic, looking at the next product set. Put your attention there rather than on things that are out of your control. And then the last sort of set of CEOs are very emotional, driven by their heart. And of course, that means that they struggle with strategy. So they always get tied up in their emotions and the drama versus execution on the strategy. So you very much have to look at each CEO differently and go, and you have to get to know the person, right? Where are they hitting the wall right now? And what's their underlying pattern? And you need to do the biggest bit of work on their underlying pattern. So that's how I look at it.
So if I'm summarizing correctly, there's 4, 5, 6?
6, yeah.
6 major types of CEOs, and each have their pros and cons.
Yeah, and they each have this superpower, and they all have a kryptonite. And the kryptonite's not always necessarily just the opposite of their superpower. It's much deeper than that. It's much more nuanced than that. So someone could have a superpower of being a dreamer and have a kryptonite of being too emotionally driven, getting triggered all the time. Or they could be too judgmental. Or they could just lack the ability to play and be light, or they could lack the ability to drive the impact, and get down to the real world, the operational world. And you don't know until you know that person.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed working with you is that before I became CEO, I thought it's just a role, you figure it out. A little bit like being a dad, you just kind of wing it when you get to it. And there's really all this science that goes behind it, just mapping a coach from a physical sport. If you want to throw a baseball, you got to hold it like this. You do this with your arm. This is how you rest your arm. This is how you catch the ball. This is how you bat. And, it's just a little bit the same with CEO. This is how you rest your mind. This is your weakness. This is your strength. This is how you do more of your strength and less of your weakness. So it's been real eye-opening for me. And being the Gordon Gekko child of the 80s, it was a very new awakening for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to scale, then your real job is getting other people to do the jobs. None of them will ever do, from a founder's point of view, none of them will ever do the job as well as you in certain areas because you were the one that was passionate about it. You know, it's the fire inside you. So they're never going to have the exact same fire. They go, hey, I believe in this, but they may not have the same fire as you have. So let's say you get 85%. Well, you know, if you look at the stats in the world, most companies get less than 50%. So if you can get 85% out of your core employees, the ones that make the big difference, and then you're doing above the average. Because a lot of people out there are disengaged in their jobs. They clock it in, they clock it out. They're ambivalent. Yeah, they'll do a fair job. They're not trying to rip you off, but they're not going to do more than that. And if you can, by who you're being and what you're doing, move that needle up to 85%, now they want it. Now they want to do good for you. You know, they go, Jason, you know, like, wow. I remember recently we just did a survey and like, hey, what do you like about Jason? And they said, we've never met anyone who's so passionate about this, and they just keep going. You know, the passion never dries out. The fire's always there. And we love the fact that he focuses on tech and makes tech, you know, so important. We feel really seen and heard. And I said, well, what's the downside? And they said, well, the downside is he's so passionate, he can get micromanagey, he can lean in and lean over us. And they all know what's driving it. They know it's not a bad intention, but you can see how, you know, sometimes the fire can warm people and get them more motivated, and sometimes they get too close, it can burn them. So, yeah.
And with the 90 employees we have here, I'm trying to be the best CEO I can. We have 90 employees. Everybody has families, whether they have their own children or their extended families. Everybody has partners and friends in their lives. And one of the things that's been hard for me to realize is that if I bring the bad side of me to work, I can have all these negative ripples, which will trickle down and negative repercussions will happen. And the opposite is true, where if I bring positive energy, there can be positive ripples. And if you think about the network effects of directly affecting 90 people who probably affect a couple hundred people, that I have to be on my A game because I have my own weaknesses and judgments and bad days and, you know, angry outbursts and things like that, that the more I can dial that in, do more of the good, less of the bad, the more you can elevate these couple hundred people.
Yeah.
Which is an uplifting thought, but also a bit daunting that, you know, because I have bad days sometimes and I want to throw shit against the wall.
Yeah, well, I'm working with another business just around the corner, and, you know, one of the guys is sort of facing the same sort of things as you. And I said, look, when you're having one of your bad days, don't come into work until you've gone to the gym and worked out or sat in a cafe. You know, don't come into work until you're ready, because the impact that you have, because of that you're a director and you hold a lot of power, is exponentially more than someone else in the organization. And that's been a few months now that he's been doing that. We surveyed the employees and they said, it's night and day. It's night and day. When he comes in now, he say, hey, I just had this good workout, or I just read this piece in the paper. He's excited and inspirational. And that's the person that we want to work with. You know, we don't want to work with Mr. Grumpy.
Yeah. Well, it's the work continues, shall we say.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for stopping by, and I hope the listeners enjoyed, you know, pulling back the curtain a little bit on what it's like to be a CEO and some of the things that go through my mind. If somebody wants to read more about some of the stuff they do, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you'd look up our website. It's the zoneglobal.com, and I'm Liam Forde. You can find me on LinkedIn under Liam Forde, and then you'll see me associated with the Zone, so just reach out anytime, and I'm always here, as you know.
All right. Well, thanks very much for stopping by. A bit of a different episode, trying to give you a flavor of not only the business of betting, but the business behind the business in betting. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. All the best.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.